story BB gun and just
The Seagulls
light
or
it the
the
fuck
Pelicans?
both. Oh, being out, yeah, it's similar to the fucking bird thing that you got going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you would hear that thing squawking away in the morning, and when the only thing you wanted to do was just sleep. Then there was a chicken. About my
What?
There's a chicken. Well, not in Boston, but like made by my,
And not
by my parents.
there's chicken.
My parents' home and went down across the yard. There was a fucking rooster that would go off.
Oh, well, cock-a-doodle-doo.
Yeah, you're like, or what? Well, that was a horrible cockle-doodle-doo. But
I mean, it sounded right.
Fucking awful. Worst alarm in the morning.
Hello and welcome to the Average Bros Gym Podcast. We are your hosts with the average hosts with eerily similar names, Kory and Croy. And we're going to walk you through fitness, health, and life advice which seeks to meet you where you're at. No polarizing black and white takes, just genuine advice and good conversation. I missed telling you that we will never tell you the only way to do things. We won't do that. For the most part. Kory, how are you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. Gearing up for a lovely New Year's week and weekend.
Yes, we're recording this prior to New Year's, so we have a New Year's episode coming out, which will be released on New Year's Day. So there you go, listen to that one. This one will be the following week.
Yeah.
We talk about a bunch of things. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about like terms. So this is low-hanging fruit. What do things mean? Yeah. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. What do things mean? Why do we use them? How do we use them in training? And kind of just making sure that you feel like you're on top of terminology that's going to be used in programming online, anything you maybe purchase from someone online, programming that's going to, or terms that are going to be used in programming and group fitness, as well as, you know, your own personal training sessions. What does that look like? And kind of walk you through that. So that's what we're doing today, Kory.
Which the verbiage in health and fitness, as far I should just say like training, it can be rather overwhelming at times. A lot of times we'll bring intros in, people that are just wanting to visit the gym for the first time, and we'll go around and show them the space, and at least part of what we'll do as well is bring them over to the whiteboard. In this instance, I'm referring specifically to CrossFit affiliates. The introductory session for a new member coming on into a different space, Orange Theory, Lifetime, they have a whole different process. But one of the aspects of our intro that we do, take them around, show them the facility, and we'll bring it up to the whiteboard. And it's kind of fun to look at the expression on people's faces when they're looking over the whiteboard, which has our warm-up written down, has our strength piece written down, and then has our workout, Metcon, WOD, if you will, on the whiteboard as well. And just to see them kind of scan the board, and you can just kind of see them and the gears turning a little bit in their head trying to decipher this fucking code that they see.
Don't you love when you ask someone if they have any questions and they say no? The very first thing they have when you start everything is a question, or like you see them talking to other people around them, like kind of trying to figure out, I'm like, God damn it, I fucking knew it. I thought you said. And I think that's super normal. But I think for the most part, I think people are also kind of afraid to ask questions sometimes because they don't want to look. They don't want to look dumb, which is fair.
All the time. Back in school, you're like, you know,
the reading thing again.
Yeah, going back to that, like you don't want to mess up a word. You don't want to answer the question and just be completely way off base.
It sucks to answer a question.
Get a piece of shit teacher that makes fun of you as you do it, or just like a little snide remark. The little kids giggle and laugh at you as you answered incorrectly. Well, like 8 + 7 was.
Don't you love it when it's like you answer a question and then like whoever is posing that question is looking for a different answer.
Yeah.
And so you pose that answer, and they're like, "Yeah, sure." Like,
just the immediate, yeah, you're fucking off.
Sure. And that one, yeah, but
sure.
And then you're like, "Damn, I'm not wrong, but I'm wrong." Like, I fucked up that question.
One of the most anxiety-ridden experiences that I ever had as a kid was in elementary school, and you would sit in your rows and you would play a game in our math portion where one person would stand up. They would start at the edge of the room. You were sitting down in your chair, and the teacher would shout out or read a math problem.
They'd yell at you. A math problem.
Yeah, just
8
+ 7.
I scream it as loud as possible.
But
extreme.
The point of the game was to like see how many spaces you could get in a row like over other people, and then by like the end of that section or whatever, from how I remember, that's kind of how you scored. So if you were able to get through 15 math problems, you'd get like 15 points kind of thing, from what I recall. But anyways, you'd be standing next to this person, or you're the one sitting down reading out the math equation, and in order to be able to get it right after the teacher would read it, whoever said it first was able to then move on.
It's Family Feud.
But yeah, but like only solely based on math, and I'm just like sitting there like fuck.
It seems like a much worse Family Feud.
Oh yeah, math. Exactly. Yeah. I don't get the fun-filled topics, you know. Oh no,
show me potato salad.
Yeah, no. Those ones are fun. Oh god. But yeah, no, it would be all just like addition, subtraction, multiplication. First one is say 4 times 9. You're sitting there like duh.
Yeah.
Just nothing. And that's how I would also imagine people feel when they're looking at a whiteboard filled with, what is AMRAP? Or they're in the middle of class and everyone's starting to do stuff and they don't know the terminology and whatnot. And yeah, that could be like really anxiety filled.
Superset, drop set,
all the things.
Giant set,
yeah,
all
you know.
The things.
And you're like, I don't want to. Yeah, because in that instance, like you're like, I don't want to be perceived as the dumb one. I don't want to be perceived as the person that doesn't really know what they're doing. Like apparently everyone here in this room is kind of in the know, and I'm sitting over here just. All right, trying to decipher what's going on or what does this mean. I don't want to be like that person that completely is the telltale sign that, oh, you're new and you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
I feel is kind of the perception when you're having to ask these questions, which again, they're great questions. If you don't know these terms and phrases because they are important concepts to be able to understand when it pertains to your training, these are the things that you genuinely need and should know, and it's going to make you feel way more comfortable in the environment that you're training in. Once you start to understand those terms and those phrases and those concepts, then you're in the know, your understanding of what's going on around you and what the people are doing and what the goal and intent and focus of that thing is. It's incredibly powerful. It's going to make you feel more comfortable in the gym, and ultimately lead to just like better training sessions because you're not having to sit there kind of trying to figure out what's all going on. So yeah, like AMRAP, ask that question, like, oh, as many reps as possible, or drop set. Croy, what is a drop set?
Well, here we go. We're getting right into it, team. So yeah, AMRAP. So one thing you'll see in certain CrossFit spaces, in certain group fitness spaces in general. I mean, obviously, like Lifetime's gonna have that in their GTX and their Alpha. Like Orange Theory has AMRAPS AAP, like as many reps as possible, right? So AMRAP is as many reps as possible. That's what it stands for. So the idea in an AMRAP is to kind of get more volume in a shorter training period with less recovery, right? Mm-hmm. So in an AMRAP, you're going to try to get as many repetitions of a certain exercise or a certain round or a certain circuit of exercises, I could touch on all those things, as possible, right? So you might have like, 1 minute AMRAP, as many reps as possible of a wall ball or a front squat or a clean, a dumbbell clean, whatever that is. You're trying to get as many repetitions as possible in that space. Mm-hmm. The idea being, at least from my end, from my understanding, is you're trying to fit more volume in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and you're increasing that intensity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Typically, we'd like to think about, like, let's say you go to a box gym and you're like, I'm going to do 3 sets of 10, right? That's a pretty standard way of doing things, but you can change over time. But the idea is, maybe you do 3 sets of 10, but maybe you could do 17, or maybe you could do 15, or something like that. So it's like people tend to stop short of their threshold. Mm-hmm. People tend to perceive their exertion to be higher than it actually is, right? Oh, I'm really struggling to finish this last rep. Okay, but you could do like 4 more of those things, and I see it all the time. We both see it all the time.
Yeah, perceived rate of exertion.
Absolutely. There we go. Mm-hmm. RPE. We're gonna throw that in there. So I think AMRAP in general, as many reps as possible, is a definition, and the idea is trying to get in more volume in a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. And you just asked drop set.
Yep.
So Kory, let's talk about drop set.
Yeah. So drop set, like you have your prescribed number of repetitions that you're going to be looking to hit. Let's say you're going for a set of 10, but then you're going to do a drop set afterwards, where after you hit your repetitions, let's say of 10 bicep curls or 10 bench press, could be whatever weight, whatever movement, squats. And then you would reduce the load that you were moving for that set by 10 to 30%. In that range, it's going to vary. And then crank out several more repetitions at that lighter load. And this is generally a term that you're going to hear more within a bodybuilding and hypertrophy type focus. generally at CrossFit, we're not going to be doing a drop set per se, depending on the program. Obviously, everyone's a little bit different, but if you hear or doing a drop set, it's probably going to say, would you say it's fair in a more hypertrophy focused bodybuilding type of split? Because a lot of the terms too that we're going to be using here, yes, there are going to be some that are interchangeable across different programs, CrossFit, Orange Theory, bodybuilding, but there are going to be some where they're a little bit more geared specifically towards a area.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and within that, hypertrophy is essentially you are, I mean, I guess you would say the large enlargement of muscles in the first place. So without going too deep into it, I mean, essentially you are kind of like splitting muscle fibers. You are gaining more muscle mass. You are building your muscle. You are creating a larger muscle belly, right? Mm-hmm. So hypertrophy is like getting bigger muscles. I mean, first and foremost. Hypertrophy is kind of a different than pure raw strength. Raw strength is kind of, we talked about it a little bit, I think in episode maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But raw strength is a little bit more kind of like, think about your muscle as being like a drum, right? Mm-hmm. Hypertrophy is like the size of the drum, the size of your muscle. Mm-hmm. Strength is more of kind of like the amount of mallets or the amount of sticks hitting that drum.
Yep.
So you can have a smaller overall muscle size, but still be stronger than someone with bigger muscles because you have more of your essentially, kind of trying to think about it. Motor units. There we go. Innervating that muscle. So you have more signals being sent to your muscle to lift heavier weight, even if the actual muscle itself is not as big. Mm-hmm. So hypertrophy is essentially getting bigger muscles. Doesn't necessarily mean you're stronger than someone with smaller muscles. I mean, it can a lot of the time because your potential is larger. Mm-hmm. But hypertrophy is essentially bigger muscles. Mm-hmm. Drop set works in that way because you are, again, forcing more volume in a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. Think about if you do three sets of 10 repetitions, right? That's 30 set repetitions. If you do a drop set at the end of that third set, let's just say one drop set, 3 by 10 at this weight. Okay, but then you drop down 5 pounds. You do as many as you possibly can at that weight. Then you drop down another 5 pounds. So you're able to add much more volume in a short amount of time, which can lead to larger muscle growth. Yeah. That's kind of the kind of, what's what I call it, the relationship between drop sets and hypertrophy in that sense.
And one thing, if and when you do decide to incorporate hypertrophy within your training, and you're hitting that level of intensity, you're increasing that volume, one thing you're probably going to experience is another really great term, which, beautiful little caveat here, delayed onset muscle soreness.
DOMS, baby.
DOMS. And you'll hear that one as well, like, oh my gosh, my DOMS, it's like, that's that
muscle so sore.
And that's that muscle soreness, that experience a day or 2 days after a workout. And speaking from experience, I would say that generally when I've incorporated more of a hypertrophy type focus within my own programming, that's when I experience DOMS the most. If I'm doing a heavy strength training program, let's say much heavier percentages of your 1 rep max at potentially lighter end volumes, and you could say repetition ranges. Think 1 to 5 repetitions for 3 to 5 sets, as opposed to more of a hypertrophy rep range, which might be more in that 8 to 12, 15. Now you're getting more muscular endurance focus. The delayed onset muscle soreness I will more often experience during those hypertrophy type focus training sessions in the 8 to 12. If I get more of the strength training focus, I would say that's more where you get that CNS type of fatigue, so central nervous system fatigue, where I'm like, now my body, I just feel like energy wise, I'm tired. I feel a little bit more lethargic. There's a cylinder that's kind of not firing.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair from your experience in terms of your delayed onset muscle soreness?
I think CNS fatigue, so again, central nervous system fatigue, is very much over-reported. I think a lot of people that think they have CNS fatigue don't have CNS. And that's Because y'all don't train hard enough to get C. I'm not gonna be
thank you.
I'm not saying I do.
This is a very good clarification. This is a very good clarification.
Most people are like, man, I've got this CNS video. I'm like, no, you fucking don't. You're just tired. So that's different, right? You just slept like an asshole and you had caffeine and you have nothing else. So yeah, so like you're saying, CNS fatigue, a little bit more kind of that like high weight, lower repetition range. Tend to get that because you're asking more of your central nervous system versus muscular hypertrophy when you're kind of sticking to lower repetition or higher repetition ranges, lower weight-ish for the most part. Yeah. You're not asking the same demands of that nervous system, but that can be mix and match, right? Muscular hypertrophy, getting bigger muscles, can happen at any rep range. A lot of new studies coming out, and don't ask me, ask Brad Schoenfeld, who knows much more than I do. But and again, if you're looking at more of this stuff, if you do want to know more, Brad Schoenfeld is a great resource for you. But you know, a lot of the stuff that he's been involved in shows that you can experience bigger muscle growth, muscular hypertrophy at most rep ranges, anywhere from 5 to 25, whatever it is, as long as you're experiencing the fatigue that you're looking for. So that's kind of what that means, and I think within that we did use a bunch of terms that people don't even know anyway. But again, questions, reach out to Average Pros Gym Podcast at gmail.com.
And that is also fair though, like why you oftentimes will hear trainers or us in this instance talk about these terms or these concepts sometimes where we're like generally 1 to 5 or in the 8 to 12 range, because there's some overlap here. You're within programming styles, within what it is that you're wanting to train, and a lot of that comes down to, if you listen back to last pod, setting a SMART goal, whatever, identifying what it is that we want to work towards. That can help us get a better understanding and direction as to where you want to go and the training protocols that are going to be necessary for you to be able to achieve those goals. So if you're looking to get strong and increase your ability to be able to move and shift heavy loads, we might go more of a strength program. If you want to increase muscle size, you're thinking about bodybuilder. But a lot of times this correlates with the I want to be toned look, and we're looking at body weight reduction and now macronutrients. We can talk about that one. What are macros? There's a term.
Oh my God. Every answer begets one more question. Let's go.
You just kind of worm your way down that rabbit hole. And so a perfect example as to when somebody's brand new to this area of health and fitness, there's a lot to, again, digest, for lack of a better term. You're trying to learn exercise terms and phrases, and you're getting into an environment that you probably were potentially uncomfortable with already at the beginning. Now you have to learn about the macronutrient side of things, being your protein, fats, and carbs, how nutrition all plays a role, and it can be very overwhelming.
Shout out to, okay, hold on, you gotta make a really good point, because Kory, you and I have probably been have been hearing these terms or seeing these terms being used for probably, man, I don't want to date us, but like 20 years at least. I mean, I started weightlifting when I was 13.
Yes, okay, in that sense, if you're accounting, I thought if you were just saying like from a coaching standpoint, not that long.
No, in general, but like we used to browse at bodybuilding.com.
100%.
I mean, who didn't?
100%. Yep. You're watching again the Arnold videos, and it spurs that little interest in sports and all those things. But yes.
So for us, I think it's really easy to say, oh man, well of course this is this, or of course this is this, because we've seen these terms being used for 20 plus years.
Yes.
A lot of you have not. It's like learning a new language.
It very much is.
So one of the first things we can talk about for everybody is the concept of progressive overload. So in anything else we talk about, the idea is you're probably using those under the umbrella of the term progressive overload. Does one do drop set? Why does one do AMRAP? Why does one do whatever they do? Their goal is to get progressive overload. So progressive overload is the idea, just the concept of slowly adding more intensity over time. That doesn't necessarily mean you work like as hard as possible over time. But let's say you've got, one of the key ways we do this is by adding weight. Easiest way to do it. Okay, you did bicep curls with 20 pounds this week. Can we go to 25 next week? Bicep curls 25 pounds this week. Can we go to 30 pounds next week? Whatever that is. So one of the easiest ways to progressive overload is to add more weight. Now, the idea behind progressive overload is that your body adapts to the stimulus which you put upon it. Mm-hmm. If Kory does the same weight over and over and over again, it, for whatever exercise, it will not have the same effect as it does when he first does it. Mm-hmm. Because his body will adapt to that stressor, right? So what he needs to do is slowly add different intensities over time to change the way his body responds, to actually initiate a response within his body. Yep. So that is the idea behind progressive overload. You can't just do the same weights, the same exercise, the same tempo, the same whatever for years and expect change.
Yep. I think this is a great spot as well to, regardless of which training methodology that you're going to get into, or I should say area, strength, hypertrophy, and we're talking about those specifically in this instance now, strength and hypertrophy. We also got to make sure that, all right, yeah, we can give you a rep range, set range, here's the volume, but to your point right there, we also got to make sure that we're hitting the right intensity with that. So generally speaking, if you're going to want to get strong, then yeah, we might have you on a program that's doing like 3 sets of 5, and we can talk about volume and bringing those things up. But for that program to also work, you got to make sure that you're hitting it with the right intensity as well. So in that strength set, that last rep has got to be a grind. And a hypertrophy, you're thinking like those last 2 to 3 reps, you know, you really got to be like working for that for any of these programs and things that we're going to be working. You know, well, maybe not cry. Yeah. And that's another good clarification as well. You're not trying to beat your body into the ground. And I feel like that's also another thing. A lot of people do that. They try to stick with the program and whatnot. But yes, regardless, if we're looking at sets, volume, your overall amount of work that you're doing, in order for that to work, to elicit the stimulus for hypertrophy, muscle growth, to elicit the stimulus for strength and actually being able to recruit more motor units and shift more heavy load, for those to work, you also got to make sure to hit it with the right intensity as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it all works to essentially improve either your strength or your endurance or your muscle mass, all these things, right? We have so many goals, but it all works with progressive overload. You need to be changing the way you approach things over time. So one of the easiest ways to do that, we just talked about that, is adding weight, right? Easy, right? Yeah, I mean, not easy in terms of practice, but easy in terms of concept, adding weight. Now, another way we can do that is by adding tempo. Tempo is something we use to describe how long it takes you to complete a given repetition. So, let's say, Kory, that you're lifting some weight. Well, maybe like you're front squatting. What's your front squat right now? What's like your
max?
5 rep? What's like your 5 rep max front squat?
Ooh, it's been a minute since I would have tested out a 5 rep. It's been a minute.
Fucking minute.
Yeah, been a minute. 5 rep, I would ballpark.
Why does that make me laugh? I don't know. I just love it.
Because this is also another thing. When you've been in the gym long enough, I mean, like, if somebody's like, "Hey, what's your bench?" You know, or something like that, they probably have a good idea of what their 1 rep is. But when I start getting into the 3 and 5s, then I start getting a little bit hazy.
Sorry, I picked 5 randomly.
Yeah, it was like if it was 1 rep, I could tell you without a shred of a doubt. But 5 rep, probably around 300, just a little north of 300.
Sure.
Yeah,
a little north of 300. So,
300 kilos.
Yeah. Well, let's say Kory's going for a 5 rep max, right? Let's say he wants to improve his 5 rep max. Doesn't give me, maybe 3 rep, 1 rep, whatever. And so, 5 rep max means how many repetitions or how much weight you can lift for like 5 reps and only 5 reps.
Only 5, like you can't do
1 to 5. Yeah. You can't do a single
rep more.
So let's say he wants to improve that, right? But let's say just that next pound, that next 5 pounds, just really fucking hard. Just can't hit it. What he might do is maybe keep the same weight or adjust his weight a little bit and work on tempo, right? So tempo is, let's say you're doing a standard tempo is what? Eccentric, pause, concentric. So
we should just hit real quick on those terms.
Sorry,
just real quick. Eccentric, concentric.
Yes. Eccentric is a lowering phase of the movement. So if I am doing a bicep curl, my eccentric is when my dumbbell and my palm, let's say I'm dumbbell bicep curl, I'm lowering that weight down to the floor.
Yep.
Eccentric, lowering. In a squat, it's maybe you're stood up. Eccentric is lowering down into your squat. It's the lowering phase of the movement, the lengthening muscle. So concentric is the opposite. It's the shortening.
Yep.
So in a bicep curl, it's eccentric is lowering the weight down to the floor. Mm-hmm. Concentric is curling the weight palm to the shoulder all the way up.
Yep.
It's doing your flex motion.
Yep.
Squatting, eccentric is lowering yourself down to that squat position. Mm-hmm. Concentric is standing the weight up, mm-hmm. right? So Kory might add tempo, slow down his eccentric motion mm-hmm. in order to increase his time under tension.
Yep.
And that is a way to also change your strength, add muscular hypertrophy mm-hmm. without necessarily adding weight.
Yep. And another one on this, speaking of time.
Oh my gosh.
So time under tension, another way to work on your program is thinking about the rest intervals that you're doing too. That's like a really important aspect as well pertaining to hypertrophy. And someone's thinking like, okay, well, rest interval, what are we looking at there? Time in between your sets that you're working on. So 3 sets of 10, but if you look at a program and it says you only get 90 seconds worth of rest, okay, yeah, what's your resting interval? That'd be like another good one to know.
Sure.
As it relates to hypertrophy and eccentric, concentric movements.
So Kory might not be able to hit that next weight with his front squat 5 rep max, but what he could do is slow down the tempo, add more tension into it. Maybe he and that might get him strong without necessarily adding that to weight, because you don't need to hit that next weight in order to actually be able to hit that next weight, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So Kory doesn't need to front squat 310 in order to be able to do 310 pounds, right? So if he does his tempo work, if he adds that in and adds his time under tension for maybe like a 3-week period, 2-week period of whatever he's doing, maybe he adds like a 2-second concentric or eccentric, lowers himself down by 2 seconds, 1, 2, then back up. Maybe the next week he does a 3-second eccentric, 1, 2, 3, then back up. Maybe he adds a pause, which is another thing. So maybe that 3rd week he does 3-second eccentric or 2-second eccentric with a pause at the bottom. So 1, 2, pause, back up. Maybe that 4th week, this man's able to hit 305, 310, because you're still overloading your muscle with a new stimulus, even if it's the same weight.
Yep. And even terms like that, it sounds just so simple to us, right? Like max, okay? But like then it's not only understanding like what that definition is specifically, but I think another key to this as well, it's like you got to know what that feels like, what that truly feels like. I can maybe in my head think about, all right, what does that max feel? And this can go to another rate of perceived exertion.
Sure.
So, all right, if you don't know your percentages on a given lift based upon your, could be 1 rep max, again, what is the heaviest amount of weight that you can lift just one time? That's it, 1 rep max. Now you can go into different program variables like Croy just mentioned. All of a sudden you add in maybe some eccentrics within your lifts but you're going to do that at a lighter end percentage more often than not of your 1 rep max. If you don't know that, then maybe what we would go into is a rate of perceived exertion. And this is another term and a concept that you'll hear as well. And you're basing on a scale generally from 1 to 10. There's other ones out there that'll go to like 18 and 20. I can't remember the names of them specifically.
The standard one is 1 to 10.
1 to 10. 1 to 10.
Right?
Yep. And then, rate of precision, and you have it programmed in there for, an RPE, we'll just say 2. So RPE 2, you're doing that lift, could be squats, at an RPE 8. Let's say you, in your mind, after having done that set, could you have done 2 more repetitions, right? If it was an RPE, what would it be, like 1.5? Because then it goes not only from repetitions, but then could you have also just increased the weight more and done not any more repetitions, but maybe at just a slightly heavier weight? Another concept that you'll hear oftentimes within programming as well, RPE, rate of perceived exertion, and using a scale if you don't know what your percentages might be. And this all comes with time, being in the gym, being around these concepts, doing different training programs and protocols. So again, regardless of if you're in Orange Theory and Lifetime and CrossFit, there's a lot of terminology to know. Some of it does cross over, some of it stays in more specific lanes.
So you're listening to this right now and you're thinking to yourself, what the fuck are they talking about? Know that that's super normal. That's totally okay. We're trying to break it down as much as possible, but obviously, you know, a lot of it is like you might be jotting down notes right now. RPE equals. So yes, RPE, rating of perceived exertion. Essentially, I mean, you see this in doctors' offices. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain like today? Right. Same thing here. You know, if you, so as Kory mentioned,
that's a really good analogy right there. Yes.
Like let's say you're doing a 3 sets of 5 front squats at RPE of 8. What that means is you can do those 5 reps, but you maybe could do 7.
Yeah.
Because it's 2 subtracting from 10, right? As a general guideline, coaches will be different. If you're working with a specific coach, they might have a different concept of it. Please ask them to clarify what they mean. RIR is another reps in reserve. People will use that instead sometimes of RPE. So I know Strength Ratio is a program, is a gym out in Asheville, North Carolina. Zach, the owner there, uses that quite a bit. Very, very kind of leaning about that, very, very understanding of like, okay, cool, this is what we want you to shoot for. This is a feeling we want you to shoot for. It's not necessarily a weight. It's not necessarily a percentage. It's a feeling of what we're going for, and that feeling might change, but this is what we want to elicit in that area.
Yeah, what's that intended stimulus?
Exactly. Absolutely.
What's that intended stimulus?
So we've been over a couple things. Man, we've been over progressive overload a little bit. So to recap, I guess progressive overload is the basis behind exercise. It doesn't have to be weightlifting. It can be running. If you run the same, like let's say, okay, so Orange Theory, obviously we wear what we call an OTB, a heart rate monitor, right? Tracks your heart rate zones, what we call aerobic and anaerobic threshold. So we color code that at Orange Theory. Green zone is basically being your aerobic capacity. Orange zone basically being your anaerobic threshold. When your body switches over to burning more carbohydrates, and you're breathing, you're not getting as much oxygen as you are expelling CO2. That's your anaerobic threshold, right? That is malleable. You can change the anaerobic threshold depending on your conditioning. So oftentimes what we see is people will start to come in pretty consistently, maybe 5, 4, 6 times a week, whatever that is. As they become more accustomed to cardiovascular conditioning, that anaerobic threshold gets pushed further and further away. Basically, what happens is it's harder to get into that higher intensity stimulus where your body is now switching over to burning more carbohydrates and expelling more CO2 than it is taking oxygen. So at Orange Theory, at least, because the colors are really easy to talk about, aerobic is green, anaerobic is orange. So what people will say is like, man, I can't get my orange zone anymore. It's so hard to get to my orange zone. Well, what you're doing is because of your progressive overload, because you're experiencing that same stimulus consistently, your heart rate response is improving. You are reduced, like your resting heart rate is lower. Your heart rate is recovering faster, so it's coming back to a lower heart rate faster. It's not staying in an elevated state. So that is progressive overload. So it doesn't have to be just weights. It can be cardiovascular exercise. It can be whatever it is. But that is kind of how you measure that. So it's like, well, you gotta fucking step it up. You have to add more intensity. You can't you can't lift a 20-pound dumbbell for 3 years and expect the same results as when you first started.
Yep. And that's in and of itself. Like if there was almost if you could argue one concept to really grasp and understand at its core, progressive overload is going to be one that kind of correlates again with that intensity to a degree as well. But for any of these programs to work, any of these this terminology and phrases, all of this is still incredibly important to just understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. But if it goes back to that intensity piece and that progressive overload, like that is going to be so critically important to continue to make some actual tangible progress like towards these goals. Let's see, delayed onset muscle soreness, talking about concentric, eccentric. What would be another term that you'd want to break on down?
Hey everybody, this is kind of where the episode went off the rails a little bit and we started talking about something that had nothing to do with fitness terms and definitions. So if that was all you're interested in, thanks for listening. Appreciate everybody here. Otherwise, if you want to kind of move on to part 2, we discuss a little bit more in detail random things that we just really enjoy talking about. So anyways, friends, thanks for listening again. This is Kory from the Average Bros Gym podcast, and hope to see you next episode. Thanks.